technology. What famous paranormal events would you like to have witnessed? How will artificial intelligence affect paranormal studies?
Hello, and welcome to the 998th edition of Behind the Paranormal with Paul and Ben Eno, coming to you on this rather warm day here from WOON AM and FM radio in Woonsocket, Rhode Island, on the Paranormal Radio app from TalkStream Live on YouTube and via TuneIn.com. I'm Ben, and that was Paul. And today we bring you an open line show with our wonderful, pervasive cousin, Rick Eno, to help us tackle your questions on different paranormal topics in high strangeness. And to join in, you can give us a call from anywhere. That's 401-766-1240. That's from anywhere. Or you can email Paul at behindtheparanormal.com or reach out to us via our Facebook page. So Rick returns to us via Skype today, interested in all areas of the paranormal. He is a true Eno. He is a certified investigator for the Mutual UFO Network, also known as MUFON, and has been on our show, has been our show's Northern California reporter for years at this point. He lives with his lovely family in the San Francisco area. So Rick, welcome back to Behind the Paranormal.
Oh, thank you, Ben. Thank you, Paul. It's great to be here.
Oh, it's always wonderful to have you.
Rick is a fellow descendant of Nicholas Disborough, one of the founders of Hartford, Connecticut, and the experiencer of the first known poltergeist attack in the history of North America. To a European, anyway.
So it's in the genes, as they say.
So let's dive right in here. Ben, if you would, this is comes to us from Doug from Texas.
Yes, and so Doug writes to us, are women more prone to paranormal experiences? I'm thinking specifically of psychic or multiversal awareness. It's been my limited observation that women seem to be more in tune with such phenomena. What say you?
Well, I guess I can start us off on that. I feel better than I sound lately, so anyway, I think women perhaps are, in my experience anyway, are more prone to be honest about their experiences. That may be evening out these days. But yeah, I mean, despite current political beliefs and manufactured crises, I think women and men are better when they are unified, and the experience, the whole human experience, it really embraces both men and women. I think women are extremely sensitive and not afraid to talk about it, or to are a little more open to it. We have had a number of cases where the women in the family have been more attuned to what's going on than the men. Although the men, when you talk to them, will admit it. So, Ben, and then Rick.
Yeah, I mean, well, Rick, you're the guest here. After you.
Well, Paul brought up something really important, I think, in the whole phenomenon, which is being open to it and understanding yourself and your feelings. I think in maybe our culture, but also just the differences between men and women. Women aren't afraid to investigate as much their feelings and question what they're feeling or what they're sensing. Whereas, historically in the past, the male mantra is put your head down and go forward. Now, that doesn't apply to everyone, of course, but I definitely have the same feeling. I sense in the world when it comes to spiritual guidance or spiritual connections, you'll tend to hear about more about women sensing it. It doesn't mean that men don't, but what it does mean is that, to me, is that there's got to be a receptivity and an understanding of it, of yourself, in a different way, and that's how I explain it.
Yeah,
I guess that makes sense. My wife will happily tell you that I can be very unobservant. I'm one of those guys that opens the fridge and is like, I can't find the ketchup, and it's right in front of me, and she does this thing where she's like, she'll like ask me to grab something, and she's like, if you can't find it and I find it, it's like, I'm gonna be upset. And 9 times out of 10, she finds what she asks me to find like instantly, and so my wife will happily tell you that, and it's funny, but it's true. You know, men, we're so concerned about like the weirdest, most like niche things. Like I'll talk with a friend, right? A buddy of mine came over last night, and we talked for like 4 hours. And you know his we'll be talking, and my wonderful wife will say, oh well, you know, how's his mom doing? And I'll say, well, you know, we didn't really talk about that. It's like, okay, well, you know, what's going on with this? And it's like, well, he told me this. It's like, did you ask him more questions? No. What did you guys talk about for like 4 hours? And it's like, well, you know, we talked about a lot of things, just nothing of import. And it's like, I think I heard someone say it in a podcast once that men like are much like hobbits, and we talk about a lot of things that don't really matter, and we get very interested in things that don't really matter. But you know, women can be very practical, but also very very you know intuitive in a lot of things. My wife has pointed out on more than one occasion that you know she goes to church, she's very very devout and whatever. And she'll look around and, you know, she'll be like, 90% of the participants here are women. And I think maybe it's you know, I don't want to make speculation because I'm a man. I know nothing, right? But I think it's got something to do with just, you know, we men's minds are a mystery, and we think about things we think more than we actually do in a lot of cases, I think. And I you know, I think perhaps I guess it just depends on how you look at it. And I suppose it's sort of 6 and 1/2 dozen in the other. Perhaps it is that, you know, maybe it's that women are more vocal about it, like Rick said, that they're more open to sharing and understanding and being sort of more open with the environment around them, and men are more closed off. It could be that too. You know, there's a lot of different factors that go into it, and it's not an easy question to answer. That's for sure.
Well, you know, Ben, here's something from this morning, just to give you some color to it. Wake up this morning after a very busy graduation day yesterday. So we're all tired. I wake up next to my wife, and she's immediately thinking through practically the budget, what's going on, you know, with the budget and the family and how we're going to do these things we need to do in the future. I literally woke up, and the first thought on my mind was, why can't penguins fly? That's literally what I woke up to, and I thought about telling her that, but I didn't want to deal with what. But yeah, I mean, our brains just think differently.
I know. I'll add on to that, and I won't belabor the point anymore. I'll sometimes, you know, my wife and I will just sit there in silence, and I'll kind of just be looking off into the distance, and she'll say she says this a lot. She's like, you know, sometimes I wonder what you're thinking about. And like, you know, is he thinking about me? What's he thinking about? And then she'll ask, like, what are you thinking about? And I'll just say something like very out of left field. Like, like I think the other day she asked me, and I was like, you know, there's got to be a way to patch that hole that's like in our pavement there, because there's water going into that basement. And she's like, that's not what I expected you to say. Or it'll be something odd that she just isn't expecting. But for us, it's like, yeah, you know, that's just what you think, and it's, you know, it's important.
Well, that's maybe more than Doug needed to know, but
probably not. But you know, I don't know if that's helpful. It probably
perception
isn't.
And expression, perhaps.
Yeah, exactly. So I think it comes down to how we perceive the world around us is very different.
Yeah. So who's next there, Ben?
Who's next? So we have Chelsea from Perth, Australia, who writes about the phenomena of the third man. Writing, have you ever heard of the third man phenomena? If so, do you believe it is real, and can you talk about it?
Sure. It's not too familiar to most people, even people in the field. But I believe it's happened to me. Basically what it is, I mean, some people might consider it angelic. Probably the greatest example from history might be this Shackleton expedition to the South Pole in 1911. Now, you can imagine the technology in 1911, not very good for reaching the South Pole. However, and they ran into some serious problems when their ship was encased in ice, and the people who survived had to hoof it, I believe there were three of them, toward a whaling base on the coast of Antarctica in order to survive. They felt that there was someone with them, guiding them and getting them there without any further loss of life. That is the third man phenomenon. Although in this case, I think it was a fourth man, because there were three people. In some cases, in survival situations, people have actually seen an extra person in their party whom no one knew. I find it rather inspiring, particularly when in 1979, and I've written about this in Turning Home, I was caught in an avalanche way up north. And I felt, I was under like 8 feet of snow. I felt a hand take my right hand and pull me up through all that snow. And the people I was with were jumping on my dart trying to dig me out. And all of a sudden I popped up. I felt it was very benign, obviously. And it was really quite the experience. Whether you want to call it angelic or higher self or whatever, I consider that part of the third man phenomenon. One of the most inspiring as well would be what happened during the Joplin, Missouri tornado of 1911. Now, I should say 2011. 2011 was the worst tornado season in the U.S. since 1925. When this EF5 hit Joplin, Missouri, 157 people were killed. 75% of the town was wiped out. But later, particularly children who were in the path of the thing, and some adults, reported having seen what came to be known as the butterfly people. The humanoids with glowing faces and multicolored wings. Now, we talk about this in our 2017 book, Behind the Paranormal 2, Bigfoot Mothman, and Monsters You Never Heard of. And these are hardly monsters, just the opposite. But we have a chapter on humanoids, and we didn't know where else to put it, so we put it in there. So I think these are all very inspiring examples of the third man phenomenon.
Wow.
What say you, Rick?
Yeah.
Well, the third man phenomenon, just hearing it today and put in that sense, makes me think of things that I get anecdotal reports on now, and from the past. And I'll give you those examples. There's been examples around here, not so much as what Paul would say is a survival situation, but people phasing kind of in and out. They're in a group and then that person's gone, or that person's not there, someone appears, and in the next instant that being is gone. And I've had anecdotal reports of that in the community here. Nothing has hit the board on MUFON, which I'm kind of taking a break from right now anyways. But I've heard that phenomenon. Yeah. But it's interesting to me to hear your story about the avalanche and what happened in 2011. It makes me wonder, okay, if this is going on, what else, where else, when is this coming from? Like,
yeah,
where could it be originating?
Well, that happened to me in 1979, just for perspective.
Yeah.
So,
someone is looking out for you.
That's what you end up with. You can analyze to death. You can speculate, but in the end, I think you just have to be grateful for the experience.
Yeah.
and respected and have. I'm very big on gratitude. Ben will tell you gratitude and humility. So, Ben, what say you?
I mean, I don't really have much else to add. I've never really had any experience with it myself that I know of. Hopefully I don't. but you never know.
Stay safe. Yeah.
Right, exactly. You know, my life is very tame. It's not I'm not out climbing mountains or anything.
Well,
so
you're young yet, so who knows?
It depends on who you ask.
Well, is there a guardian angel? You know.
Yeah,
that-
I mean that's a pillar of belief among the Muslims. It's something we learned really throughout the Catholic education.
Yeah.
The Orthodox certainly very, very big on angels. There is a great awareness of what you could call supernatural beings taking care of us. Also, at the other end, parasites, preying upon our energy or whatever you want to call it. So there is a great awareness among really all belief systems, major belief systems, in guardians, or at least observers, watchers.
Yeah, no, I mean, I guess I fall into that as well. Only because it's like a lot of things that I have managed to accomplish, I can't really attribute to myself, because that's not really, I don't know. I found
The good influence of your father.
yes, really it's all you, Dad.
No, hardly.
So I mean, I don't know. There's something out there, because it's like, if I there was something that a really intelligent man from long ago once said, which is, the right thing to do is always really easy. We're the ones that make it hard. And so it's you kind of get out of your own way, and things kind of tend to work out. It's very Wu Wei, if you're familiar with Taoism. If you get my meaning here. But I guess we can move on to the next question if we have no more points further. This one's from Pat in our local listening area here, from Blackstone, Massachusetts. And Pat writes, I listened to a number of paranormal shows, and ghost hunters are always using technology. I know you guys are not so into that, but I remember a show many years ago where the guest was asked about EVPs, electronic voice phenomena, being on the AM frequency. And Paul asked the guy, does this mean the guy on the other side has an AM transmitter? Then time ran out, and the guy never answered. I also heard reports, including some on your show, that demons or parasites have used computers to communicate with people. Of course, there are ghost boxes and other devices used by ghost hunters, so are paranormal entities using our own technology, and is it for us or against us?
Well, that's a broad question and a good one. Ben, you studied stuff like AM signals. I mean, what?
Well, yeah, kind of. I mean, my degree was mostly for like, sound design and all that, but I do know enough about the physics of it to be able to answer it confidently. Because our very own station manager came down after the show, and he sat with us, and Dave Richards sat across from me right here, and he said, well, that guy doesn't know what he's talking about.
Every time I talk to Dave, I learn something.
Yeah, me too. And Dave was like, well, what we're doing right now is AM transmitting, because it's I think it was I'm trying to remember. I don't want to say it's audio modulation, but it's amplitude modulation. There we go. I don't know why I said audio. Amplitude modulation. There we go. I just took out my credentials. So, which is essentially, you're disturbing the air molecules around you in order to create sound, and so we're using our vocal cords to create amplitude modulation. And so, it's not necessarily an AM, they don't necessarily have transmitters, but what they're doing is they're disturbing the air molecules around them in order to create sound. And so, because ghosts technically are not physical in a sense, therefore they do not have vocal cords, right? It would be the argument, how are they disturbing the air molecules? And so the sort of next step would say, well, somehow, we could probably make the argument that electromagnetics is disturbing the air molecules, and because it always comes across as quote unquote whispers, right? You don't have someone, boisterously going, whoa, most of the time. You usually get, huh, coming through on things. And I remember there was a little YouTube video I watched that this guy that was doing a ghost hunt made a really funny joke, because he was a what's the word? He was a skeptic, and he was getting brought along. He was with this guy that was like a true believer or whatever. He was like, yeah, someone on the other side, they came back and they said, I have something really important I have to say, and they're like, I have to say it, I have to tell them. And then they go up to the mic and they go, huh, very important. I was like, that's a very good point, because it's like, what's the point of that? I mean, sometimes you hear people like screaming and such, and you get that on phenomena. But if you're going around asking questions or whatever, using ghost boxes, which are basically broken radios, I've had to kind of make the point that it's like, well, you can kind of have pareidolia with it, but with audio phenomena, where you kind of like make up meanings for things and you hear what you want to hear. Or, there's sometimes legitimate things that kind of come across. And really the sort of big thing on the amplitude modulation point is, the question isn't, do they have AM transmitters? The question is, how are they disturbing the air molecules in order to create this? That's kind of the big question. And, if we're talking about these entities messing around with, computers or TVs, whatever, through static, etc., it's like, well, obviously there's something that's electrical going on. It's not necessarily, they're using their ghostly powers to infest your television, like 7 Days style or whatever. It's probably something electromagnetic, if we're going to be like purely scientific about it.
Well, if our theories are correct, you're not dealing with dead people. You're dealing with perfectly physical people in parallel worlds that are intersecting or overwashing our own. And that explains the physicality of it. As an example, the center of the Litchfield Triangle case in Connecticut that we've been working on for, good grief, over 20 years, almost 20 years, we have EVPs that include the sounds of a general store operating in the 1700s. And the place was a general store in the 1700s and still is in certain parallel worlds where it's still the 1700s. Those are our theories. And they're backed up, I think, by phenomena like that. So it's not just voices, it's physical activity. When we were in the Pomfret, Connecticut case, 1970, 1972, you'd go in there and you'd hear the sounds of daily life, including objects, farm implements, wagon wheels, and that sort of thing, which is the first inkling I ever got that we're not dealing with dead people, we're dealing with time and space, which I think is far more interesting. Rick, why don't you jump in here?
Yeah, sure. First of all, I think you nailed it. We're kind of, when you hear reports of that, usually, what I give my perspective on is you're picking up what's happening in their world, just as you said. It's not that they're trying to control. It's not that they even necessarily have a radio or a transmitter. It's how that universe works, and that's what we're getting a glimpse of. So when people, I heard this on the radio, and they think it's a direct message to them or something like that, probably not. Probably we're picking up their wavelength, long amplitude, or their frequency, and we're kind of eavesdropping on a conversation that we necessarily don't even understand. But that's my take on it in most cases. I very rarely come across people who felt they were being directly trying to be communicated across through a radio or so forth. I have had people tell me that when they, and I'm not a supporter of this, but when they do seances, they get messages and so forth, which is a completely different category. And I don't feel that's necessarily it either. I think you're eavesdropping, and God help you if a parasite finds out you're there, and then you're going to have some problems. But yeah.
Well, there's another dimension to this if we want to take another look at it, and if we shift ever so slightly, we can see that technology has always been used in the broadest sense to interact with the unknown, right? And so by this I mean like pretty much anything we've sort of invented over, the millennia to be able to interact with the unknown, whether it's, altars, instruments, idols, bells, right? All of these bells were initially made. This is a fun fact I learned forever ago when I was a kid. The reason that bells are on churches was to keep spirits away. That was the reason
Well,
that
demons
particularly. That was like the whole point of having bells. Now that like you don't really see them on most churches nowadays, but like in more modern senses. But if you ever go to like Europe or anything like that, or any sort of like old time quote unquote traditional places, you'll find that there's bells and stuff. And the reason that they have bells is for that particular thing. It's like singing bowls, right? Same difference, ever so slightly different spirituality, but it's the same thing. And we've always kind of used these tools to interact with the world around us. Now we have, broken radios called spirit boxes, and we have, EMF meters and all these things, and it's like the phenomenon is still interacting with it.
Right.
It's like it's not analog like it used to be, a couple centuries ago. But the reason that we have these things was to interact with the unknown. So in the broadest sense, these things have always kind of been around, and I think if we're gonna, play with that idea of, well, this stuff's always been there, right? It's the same deal, just with, much less wires and electricity.
Well, it's time for our mid-show break already. You're listening to Behind the Paranormal with Paul and Ben and Rick Eno today on WOON 1240 AM, 99.5 FM in New England's kind of hot Blackstone River Valley. We'll be right back, so stick with us.
Attention bike riders. The premier event of this young season is being organized for June 3rd. It's the first annual Veterans Charity Motorcycle Run brought to you by New Englanders Helping Our Veterans in collaboration with the Elks Riders of Elks Lodge number 2136 in Franklin. The ride starts and ends at the Franklin Elks Lodge and travels through Rhode Island as well. Food will be served upon return and beverages will be available. Only $25 per operator, $10 per rider. To sign up, email treasurer@nehov.org. That's treasurer@nehov.org. All are welcome.
Local and live at 99.5 FM.
Okay, and welcome back to Behind the Paranormal with Paul and Ben Eno on WOON AM and FM. And we're doing an open line show today with our guest co-host and wonderful cousin, one of our bestest cousins, Rick Eno. And we wanted to say Happy Memorial Day to everyone in the U.S. We went around yesterday visiting ancestral graves in New England here, and it's very important, particularly it's really all about remembering our those who gave everything for the sake of our country. That must never, ever be forgotten. So God bless them. So Ben, why don't we take an email from, I guess it's Mark.
Yes, in Devon.
Via West Sussex, England. So.
Yes, we are very familiar. So,
Oh yeah.
So Mark writes to us, "Hi Ben and Paul, congratulations in advance on your upcoming landmark 1000th show." I know it's
2 weeks.
yeah, it's coming up fast.
Time flies when you're having fun.
Yes, it does, because we're already halfway through the show. So he continues to say, "The seed of this question came to me after listening to a past show in which was mentioned a particular UFO encounter that was comical. Such was its bizarreness. It involved a gray, a Bigfoot, and a lizard alien, and they walked into a bar. Now, I'm just kidding. Or some similar variation, as was alluded to on the show. It was almost as if every possible base was covered for the paranormal enthusiast, all in one convenient sighting." Very true. So my question for yourself and the guest is this: what paranormal event, encounter, or experience over the last 150 years would you like to have witnessed personally? And your answers being from the point of view of said event, having the potential to collaborate your belief system or drastically change it.
Well, I guess I'll start. All of them. I'd like to have seen all of them. I have people all the time who say, they wish they were at the Bridgeport poltergeist case of 1974. I was there, and it did change my belief system because of the physical interaction I had with what at the time we called demons and now we call parasites. That really radically had to change my belief system because it just didn't seem like what the theology or the paranormal thought said it was. I would love to have been at Rendlesham Forest. We were there, but 30 years or 40 after the case in December 1980, sir, I have to say it's difficult to choose. I'd like to have seen all of them.
What say you, Rick?
Well, from your adventures, clearly Bridgeport would be like the starting point, because I think that not only from a personal standpoint, but from a world perspective, changed a lot of people's understanding of what this phenomenon is from a very grassroots level in Connecticut down to the police and so forth. So that would probably be the first. Probably the second one would be the Flatwoods Monster.
Oh, yeah.
That is a
Virginia, yeah.
fascinating, long
Absolutely.
experience, and involving multiple UFOs and landings and crashes, all within like a 2-day period. I would have loved him and
Well,
been a
it's
part of.
a little tricky since even I wasn't born yet.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I would have to change the elsewhere, else when.
Right. Yeah, I agree with that. I would love to have seen that.
Oh yeah. If I had to take a swing at it, it's a tie between two things. One of them is not necessarily paranormal, but I think the implications are paranormal. Definitely the Mothman incident at Point Pleasant, West Virginia. That's 100% top of the list. I'm sorry, 3 things. So that's definitely top of the list. Tied for second, definitely anything related to the Loch Ness Monster. That's like a big. It's a big. Has a nice.
Oh, yeah.
Nessie has a nice home in my heart. Always has.
Ever since you were born.
Oh yeah. I had books and everything, and it was that just holds a special place in my heart. And then tied for second would be the uncovering of Göbekli Tepe.
Oh,
Not
wow.
not necessarily paranormal in a sense, but I'm so fascinated by it because it completely ruins a lot of anthropological and like historical ideas for how civilizations were built. And I sound like a clickbait article by saying that, but really it's interesting because I heard someone point this out in a lecture I listened to once that was like, it's really fascinating because if you look at its location, there's no running water anywhere. There's no forests. It's barren. There's nothing there. And there's no evidence to suggest that there was anything there before. It was just this site. So there had to be this civilization built up around it in the middle of nowhere for some reason. And usually it's like the typical historical response from an archaeologist or an anthropologist is, well, it was survival. And then kind of spirituality was tacked on at the end. Like, well, everything was met. I think it probably comes down from Maslow's hierarchy of needs, I would probably venture to guess, which is essentially this pyramid of like, you cover your basic needs like food, water, shelter. And then once you get that and you have like some sort of sense of security, then you can contemplate higher things, which makes sense practically. But the interesting thing is it almost seems like the opposite. Something happened there that made these Neolithic people want to build like a place to worship something. And it makes you wonder what could have happened there that would cause people to basically go into the middle of nowhere with no food provisions, water, nothing, and create a supply chain to get something there so that they could exist. It's super interesting.
Well, I think Mark makes a particularly important point at the end where he says, did this or would this affirm your belief system or destroy it? And I think it's worth extending that to the point of research. Are we conducting research to confirm our biases, or are we willing to be open-minded enough to do what science is supposed to do, and that's admit new possibilities and explore new areas.
Yeah, no,
I like to
agree.
think the latter is the case. But
Paul,
Rick?
I was going to say to what Ben was saying, and to close that question, how he closed his question is, Göbekli Tepe, excuse me, made me feel like we're actually behind in technology and social development.
Huh.
And let me explain why. It in my opinion, it shatters the historical views of the world to that point given by the academics because of what Ben just mentioned was found there. And it also, one of the arguments I heard, I was engaged in a conversation about Göbekli Tepe, and they're like, well, everything was stone and everything was, and I said, yeah, but if you have the technology just to develop something, you're not building it, you're not shaping it, you can just form it, right? So you're just forming this city out of nowhere, in the middle of nowhere, and you can supply it just because of the technology you have. You would build everything out of stone or something simple because you wouldn't need ornate housing structures or things like that, because you can go and do whatever you want to do anywhere you want to do. So my opinion, and to close that, Göbekli Tepe absolutely changed my view of the world and really made me understand we really are behind technologically and socially.
That's amazing. Yeah, I really respect that. I've often asked the question, particularly when I walk in and Ben's mom is watching Ancient Aliens. Why would they come a zillion light years or across world boundaries or wherever they got here, if they did, to make stuff out of rocks? But the thing is, rocks last.
Forever.
What would be left in 10,000 years of our own cities? Even the ones made of steel.
Nothing.
Yeah.
Well, yeah. I mean, we don't like. It's like the particular cement that Romans used. It's called Portland cement.
Yeah.
And they used this very particular kind because it was so strong, and that's why their columns are still standing today. It's and you drive down the street and the bridge is collapsing. Everything was really only built to last like 50 years.
Rick has a point.
And so it's like asphalt, right? Asphalt washes away, and it's really only a byproduct of fossil fuels, and it doesn't last very long. I mean, I can tell you about my driveway and also in my garage, and it doesn't last super long.
You have had problems with that since you bought the house.
Well, I think it's just because they didn't do stepped footings, but this isn't a show about construction, so we're not going to go into that.
Okay.
But
So
can
who's
you imagine
next?
how beautiful those cities were?
Yeah.
Probably breathtaking.
Oh
Yep.
yeah.
Yep.
Oh yeah, it's amazing, and it's funny. That's why I always come up with the argument that oh well it's they were our ancestors were just dumb. They didn't know anything, and it's like, are you kidding?
They wouldn't have survived.
No, it's like they wouldn't have built massive empires or done all these things if they were stupid. It's like arguably we're the dumb ones. We're creating all these things that kind of do all the work for us, and it's like I think ironically the Disney movie WALL-E kind of put the nail on the head there. If anybody's ever seen it, it's very, very tongue in cheek that it's like we humans got so dumb and just got so lazy. They just got they evolved to just be really fat and just float around and all that, and and so they built all these robots to kind of do all the stuff for them, and it's like then they just trashed the earth, and so here we are. And so it's like it's the same sort of thing. So I think at some point, it's like the whole argument over AI and all that. That's I think that's a question that comes up at some point in time.
Oh yeah.
That-
I think there's a question about that.
Yeah, exactly. And we could probably take that now if we really wanted to.
Sure.
There it is. And this is Matt from Limerick, Ireland, who writes, "We all see news about artificial intelligence, and I wonder what you think what this will do for or to paranormal research."
Yeah, it's a good question.
It is a good question.
I'll throw that one right at you, Rick.
Chat GPT, right? Well, the foundations for AI, it's just basically learning and is what they take up. ChatGPT has the ability to even interpret, in a sense, the information that's out there in the world. It can write you an essay, a beautifully written essay, which is also sad because that would mean we'd lose our further skill and able to be actual good orators and create things ourselves, but it actually can. The question is something like AI going to change the world? It definitely has already, and it will continue to. It depends on how far we're going to let it. Do I think it's a danger? I don't think it's as much of a danger to like just advancement, if that's what I call it. But I think it's a danger to your humanity because you will stop using skills that will define you as today's modern human. And I mean, you can look at some simple things right now in our population that's going on. Most children who attend public schools right now can't write cursive. They
Yep.
can't. It's lost for them. And you can replicate that in other skill sets. And you know, I bet you this year alone, probably for several years, a lot of the schoolwork that's being done is being done by AI because kids know how to use it. And as they become more comfortable, it's easier to do that. There's a decline. And, you know, Ben's point about, you know, Wall-E with the people got really fat and were in hover chairs doing nothing. You can see it headed that way. So the question is, what's going to keep you bound to your humanity? Because AI could definitely take you there. Like for me, it's faith. You know, I really believe in God and Jesus Christ, and it anchors me to want to hold on to these things that make me me and keep me the person who has to create it, the person who has to move forward with, the person who has to think about it. With AI, there's a lot of shortcuts, and it's so tempting, but it's mechanical. It's you know, it's computer, it's digital, it's everything that, in my opinion, just goes against the grain of being a human.
Yeah.
Interesting.
When it comes to a direct connection with the paranormal, and I spent half a Friday looking for this, and I couldn't find it. It was an email or a text or something, because I get hundreds of those a day. But it was a person who said that they had taken the idea of an energy parasite, very similar to what we talk about, and they submitted it to ChatGPT and asked what would such a creature be like. And they sent me this response that the AI had composed. And it's like something out of one of our books, right down the line, point by point. Now, whether
It probably was out of your book.
yeah, it could very well
Yeah,
have been.
probably. Yeah.
But yeah, there isn't too much written about that. But I was astounded. You know, and I was going to read it on there, but I just couldn't find it.
Yeah, but Paul, like the research you've done that you put out there, that's what ChatGPT is pulling from. So it's not like putting it
great.
together thing, right? So and which brings up the point which I should have finished on, the tools of an investigator, your tools, your research. You know, this person just plugged it in a ChatGPT and boom, it created this thing. It took decades of work to do that, and that is, I guess, in my opinion, a danger to the investigation of the paranormal and the connection to the paranormal. Because when everything becomes simple, you just don't do it anymore.
It's true. Yeah, that scares me. But speaking as a professional editor, I would be curious to see whether somebody could fool me with an AI composed story or essay, as opposed to one that they had written themselves, because everyone has a unique style, you know, and you can now they could probably mimic that. And matter of fact, if I can talk by then, our lecture in the fall is going to be about mimics, and we'll have to bring that in. So yeah, you don't know that yet, but
No, but that's an interesting idea.
that's a subject.
As artificial intelligence as a mimic, sort of
Yeah.
a man-made
Yeah.
version of that. Huh. That's something I'm going to be contemplating for a bit.
Well, we have
Well, we have a really interesting. So a few weeks ago, actually probably a couple months ago at this point, we had Dr. Jeffrey Kripal of Rice University on our show, and this question came up. And his whole thing, he was talking about sort of like the humanities in the paranormal, and like there's a very important portion of spirituality, which is kind of like he described as like a spark, almost.
Yeah, I
where
remember
there's that spark of like inspiration or something spiritual. He was saying that pretty much any sort of major advancement ultimately had a spiritual component to it, whether it was like Einstein or Socrates or somebody, right? There was always this spiritual spark to it, and he's like artificial intelligence can't do that because it's not human.
Yes.
There's no.
Yes.
Yeah, and it was super interesting because I'd never thought of that, and I was like, oh, because that adds an extra dimension to it.
Ben, that's really interesting you say that, because when I look at where we're going as humans, I see a war going on for minds, a war where one part is headed towards the technology, the GP chats, the being plugged in all the time, and sort of the physical world, and I will say the ease and hedonistic things that are easy in this world, right? And then I see another side, which is hanging on to the spirituality piece, the individual piece, the piece that makes you you, and achieving the same abilities to communicate through spiritual means versus the abilities to communicate through mechanical or these computer means. So it's the two separate ways of sort of achieving the same thing. I can speak to you with my mind at some point. I can pick you up on the phone, or I'm plugged in, and then I have the mechanical side. So you have these two sides. And really, it's going to be a choice. And when I look at that choice, I'm clearly on the side of spirituality. I think that is the way to accomplish what we need to do, the side of light. And I really believe that the side with AI and these other means of being plugged in all the time is more of a side, if you want to say, darkness. Because that's bound to this earth. That's bound to physical. You're not getting out of it, and you're going to have to make a choice. Whereas the spiritual side, the light side, that's timeless and boundless. And that's the side I choose.
Wow.
I'm going to send you an article I think you'll probably really like that talks about something very similar, and we can discuss it at a different point in time.
Excellent.
We have time for another question?
That we do. Excuse me. Let's see if we can find something relatively simple. This is actually kind of interesting. This kind of steers along the same sort of realm of thought that we are currently in. So this is from Chef from We Don't Know Where.
Why do I think he's from Israel?
Possible.
Yeah.
I don't know. But he writes, what's the best techniques for keeping your sanity and staying grounded when researching the vast amounts of topics and research in the realm of the paranormal? I had to stop because I was taking in so much information. I felt like I was losing my mind. But at the same time, the hunger and desire to learn never leaves. Any response would be appreciated.
Well, had he asked, worded that differently and said, how do you keep from being overwhelmed when you're out ghost hunting? I would say don't do it in the first place. Yeah. But he's talking about seeking information, which is an honorable thing to do.
Truly.
I would say, I don't know. I came up, it took me so many decades to come up in this field, if I've come up at all. And the information was very slow to come in those days. Not a lot was known, and I was able to absorb it kind of as it developed, the quantum mechanics approach, things of that kind. And I think that was a little easier for me. But today, there are so many ideas out there, so many different cases. The bombardment of information is really quite remarkable. Do we have a caller?
We do.
Okay. All right.
Hello?
Yes.
Yes, I hear you guys all the time with your show. And you're talking a lot about Gobekli Tepe.
Gobekli Tepe, yeah.
Right, and if that's fascinating, what about non-Madol? I mean, that has to, like, just be the ultimate mystery.
Yeah, anything that pushes back the timeline of human development is really fascinating, and it flies in the face of archaeology, and they can't deny it. So, you fellas have comments on that?
I don't know a ton about it, unfortunately. What about you,
I'm
Rick?
not familiar, actually.
Is that in South America?
No, that's the South Pacific, I believe.
Oh, okay. I'm
Yeah,
not that familiar with it
non-Madol.
either.
It's entire islands built out of basalt stone,
Oh, I got you. Yeah.
which is absolutely ridiculous because of where it came from.
Yeah.
It makes no sense at all.
Where'd it come from?
Oh, miles and miles over small mountains and vast waterways and everything else to build that on the shore.
This
And
comes,
it's something that people could not have really done.
yeah, this comes up a lot on the show. The question is, how could these things be accomplished? You have
Well, they
examples all
say
over
they
the
were
world.
transported magnetically, and even to this day, people go out and they test the stones which it's built out of, and they're highly magnetic.
Okay.
In fact, their test equipment stops working when they go up close to test them.
We'll have to look into that more fully.
Yeah.
There are methods of moving things that are only just being developed and that are based on sound,
Right.
sonic technology. So there are ways to do that. And again, we kind of embrace the cyclical theory of history, that it hasn't been right, a straight line from the cavemen all the way up to today, that
Yeah,
it's
there
happened
was
several
stuff
times.
Way before that.
Yeah, because you get a
Yeah,
million
way
years of
before.
empty history.
Right.
So-
But what I'm saying is, I don't believe that all of this was done by just, normal people.
Yeah,
It
well, you
couldn't
may
have
be
been.
right.
It
Yeah,
couldn't have
yeah.
been.
Question is, are there any noble people? That's
No, I'm
Yeah.
not one.
well. Thank you very much. We're out of time, unfortunately, but call in anytime. It's a good thing, and I think we're going to look into that. And thank you for the info.
Okay, yeah, that's a real good subject.
It is. Thank you again.
Okay, yeah, thank you.
Okay, let's go to our announcements.
Sure thing. Okie dokie, artichokes. We're going to start off with, in 2 weeks, that's on June 11th, we will be celebrating our 15 years on the air on also happens to be our 1000th numbered broadcast. This will be a 2-hour roundtable on ultimate questions with Dr. Jeffrey Kripal of Rice University, who I mentioned earlier, groundbreaking UFO researcher Kathleen Martin, author and lecturer, scientist, and experiencer Matthew Moniz, and renowned British consciousness researcher Anthony Peake. The show will begin on that's at noon Eastern, 9 a.m. Pacific, 5 p.m. UK, and run for 2 hours. And we will take questions via Paul at BehindTheParanormal.com.
Look for us at the Exeter UFO Festival on Labor Day weekend on September 2nd and 3rd. We plan to do our traditional show from there with a live audience on September 3rd.
And you can also... Oh, I'm sorry, Rick, that's all you.
You can visit our show website at BehindTheParanormal.com, where you can find nearly 1,200 hours of regular shows and special broadcasts since 2008 from CBS Radio, Achieve Radio, and here on Woon AM and FM. Also hear many of these broadcasts on the major podcast platforms, including iTunes, Apple Podcasts, and YouTube.
And check out our free app right on the main page at BehindTheParanormal.com. It's free, and you're welcome to download it.
And our show website has a charity page you can check out. There's several good causes that we've adopted over the years, and you can check out all of them there. That's behindtheparanormal.com.
What do we have next week, Ben?
So on June 4th, we'll welcome Jill Shelley of Minnesota-based St. Croix Paranormal Group to talk about what ghosts are.
We leave you today with a cute quote from Eleanor Roosevelt, of all people. Tomorrow is a mystery, today is a gift. That's why it's called the present. I'm Paul Eno.
And I'm Ben Eno.
And I'm Rick Eno. Thanks for joining us on our great cosmic journey, and we'll see you next time on Behind the Paranormal.
Return to this radio frequency 167 hours from now for another edition of Behind the Paranormal with Paul and Ben Eno.
Broadcasting live and local daily from the Navigant